The wind through the pines of northern Arizona still carries the smell of rain and dust. The same air two brothers breathed on the day they disappeared, September 5th, 1998. Aaron Miller, 17, and his younger brother Luke, 15, loaded camping gear into their father's old Ford Bronco. They told friends they'd spend the Labor Day weekend near Clear Creek, a canyon rim southeast of Flagstaff. Both were honor roll students at Coconino High, inseparable. Best known for wearing identical silver class rings their grandfather had given them. One engraved AM 1998, the other LM 2000. At 6:42 a.m., a neighbor saw the Bronco pull out of the driveway, country music spilling through open windows. Aaron at the wheel, Luke filming with a camcorder he'd bought secondhand for a media class project. At 10:18 a.m., the boys stopped for fuel in Winslow. Credit card receipt verified. After that, silence. By Monday morning, when they hadn't returned, their mother Janet Miller drove the highway alone, eyes scanning for tire tracks. She found nothing except a fast food cup flattened in gravel. It wasn't theirs, but she kept it anyway. Search and rescue launched the following dawn. Helicopters swept 300 square miles. Detectives logged 180 man-hours before weather closed in. No vehicle, no gear, no rings. The file went cold before Thanksgiving. Janet stayed in the same house for 24 years. The mail slot still bore the nameplate Miller Boys that Luke had stenciled as a joke. Every September, she placed 2 lanterns on the porch, one for each son, and kept them lit until the first snow. The police file gathered dust in a gray box labeled M982147. Inside, topo maps with red X's, a Polaroid of the canyon rim, and a page from Luke's notebook that read, "Find the water first. Everything else follows." Reporters came and went. The case became local legend. The Miller brothers vanishing. Theories bloomed. Flash flood, carjacking, runaway pact, even UFO forums claiming strange lights near Clear Creek. Janet ignored them all. She believed something simple. The boys had gone exploring, and the earth had folded over them. In spring 2022, a retired lineman named Henry Ross took his metal detector out after a rainstorm. He wasn't treasure hunting. He liked the quiet ping of the coils sweeping over wet ground. That morning, he walked the dry bed of Clear Creek, where runoff had stripped the surface clean. The detector chirped twice, high pitch, close together. He dug with a trowel until the tip hit something metallic. Out came 2 silver rings, side by side, pressed together by silt, as if someone had placed them deliberately. He wiped them on his sleeve. Each carried initials. Henry froze. He'd lived in Winslow long enough to remember the flyers from '98. He drove straight to the sheriff's substation. Within 48 hours, Coconino County Sheriff's Office reopened the case. Investigators returned to Clear Creek with cadaver dogs, ground radar, and the same model of metal detector Henry had used. 10 meters from where the rings were found, a dog alerted near an old cottonwood root ball. Excavation revealed fragments of nylon webbing consistent with a backpack strap and part of a license plate beginning with the digits AZC76. The Miller Broncos plate had read C7623FA. The canyon, untouched for decades, had started giving back what it kept. That night, local news led with the headline, "Rings of Hope Found in Creek Bed." For the first time since the 1990s, Janet Miller unlocked the porch lanterns and blew them out. Detective Sarah Nguyen, who hadn't even graduated high school when the boys vanished, now headed the cold case unit. She studied the old case file like scripture. Most of the 1998 search had focused upstream, assuming the brothers camped near the reservoir. But the rings were downstream, almost 10 miles south. That meant either flash flood displacement or movement by human hands. Drone imagery showed faint tire marks preserved in clay far below the rim, tracks that vanished into a collapse zone labeled Sector D3. Nguyen arranged for excavation once permits cleared. She visited Janet personally, bringing the rings sealed in evidence pouches. Janet held them under the porch light, thumb tracing the engravings. "They stayed together," she whispered. "That's all they ever promised each other." The camera cuts to her hands, trembling around the plastic. In her living room hangs a photograph, the brothers at a trailhead, sunlight slicing through juniper, both flashing peace signs. A week later, heavy equipment lowered into the canyon. Drones mapped a wash channel, now dry but scarred from old slides. On May 16th, operators spotted something. A patch of turquoise paint under shale, weathered but unmistakably metallic. The Bronco's color had been Pacific blue. Excavation began at dawn. By 10 a.m., a taillight appeared. At noon, the full rear quarter panel surfaced. Inside the collapsed cabin, mud preserved outlines of fabric, a crumpled backpack, and fragments of a cassette label. September Mix 98. Detectives found 2 seatbelts latched, no skeletal remains. In the back seat, a handheld camcorder, still encased in its zip bag. When forensic techs replayed the tape, static gave way to laughter, the brothers joking about whose mixtape was better. The camera swinging between them, blue sky flashing through windows. The final shot shows water spilling across the road, Aaron saying, "We'll be fine, it's shallow." And Luke replying, "If we're wrong, at least we'll get it on tape." The frame jerks. There's a splash, a shout, then darkness. 9 seconds of sound, followed by 24 years of silence. That night, the sheriff called Janet. She didn't ask for details. She only asked, "Did they stay side by side?" He said yes. She whispered, "Then bring them home." The recovery site at Clear Creek turned into a small field camp. Yellow tape fluttered against juniper shrubs, and the smell of wet clay mixed with engine oil from generators running spotlights through the night. Technicians moved quietly, brushing silt away from the Bronco as if they were unwrapping something alive. The vehicle had been wedged between boulders, its front half collapsed into a wash tunnel. When they pulled the door open, water poured out like breath leaving lungs. Detective Sarah Nguyen stood ankle-deep in mud, calling details into her recorder. The odometer read 162,804 miles. Gear shift in neutral. Keys still in ignition. The passenger side belt latched. Driver unbuckled. In the footwell lay a fragment of flannel and a pair of cheap sunglasses. They bagged everything separately. She knew the scene well enough to picture the moment it happened. Heavy rain upstream. A wall of brown water rushing through the canyon while the boys tried to cross, the tires slipping, the Bronco turning sideways, slamming into rock. What she couldn't picture was where the brothers had gone afterward. If they drowned, the current might have carried them into the deeper channel. Yet no remains had surfaced in 2 decades. Janet Miller waited at the rim while rangers climbed down with stretchers she knew would be empty. She had seen rescuers before. This one felt like a retrieval of time itself. Sarah approached her carefully. "We found more of their things," she said. "A camera, some personal effects." Janet nodded. "They were always recording something," she murmured. "Luke wanted to make movies. He said one day people would watch us and know we were real." At the evidence tent, the recovered camcorder sat on a drying pad. The tape was warped but readable. Technicians digitized it frame by frame until a moving image flickered onto a laptop screen. Grainy daylight, Aaron's hand covering the lens, laughter. The camera spun, showing Luke leaning out of the passenger window, shouting over music. Then the frame jolted. Mud streaks, windshield wipers fighting heavy rain. Aaron's voice, "Roads washing out, hang on." Luke's laughter cut into a gasp. The world turned sideways, and the recording ended with a splash and a metallic groan. When the clip stopped, no one in the tent spoke. A younger deputy whispered, "They were kids." Sarah closed the laptop. "They were brothers," she said, "and they kept that promise." The next week, the County Dam Authority lowered the gates on Clear Creek to allow divers into the deeper channel. The first day they found nothing but branches and old cans. On the second, a diver surfaced holding a length of rope tied around a heavy stone. Attached to it was another object, a small, waterproof pouch. Inside, a note, written in faded blue ink, read, "If anyone finds this, we stayed by the truck. Water too high, waiting for it to fall. A and L." Forensic analysis confirmed the handwriting matched Aaron's from school essays. The pouch had been weighted deliberately, probably set in a calmer eddy to keep it from drifting. The current must have buried it until erosion uncovered it. By early June, a storm rolled through again, forcing suspension of the dive. The search teams packed up, leaving markers along the creek in case more debris surfaced later. Sarah drove back to Flagstaff to deliver the news personally. Janet received her at the kitchen table with coffee already poured. The house smelled of cedar and dust, the way it had since the 90s. "They tried to wait it out," Sarah said. "The letter proves it." Janet looked at the rings on the table, still sealed in evidence plastic. "They never argued," she said. "Aaron always said if something happened, Luke should stay with the truck. I guess he did." The detective asked if she wanted the letter returned after processing. Janet smiled faintly. "Keep it in the file. Someone else will read it one day and understand that they weren't just names on a map." In August, the lab restored the last seconds of audio from the camcorder. After the crash, under the static, a voice whispered, "Still together?" followed by another, quieter, "Always." The words repeated once before the tape ended. When Sarah played that clip for Janet, she didn't cry. She simply pressed her palm against the speaker until the sound faded. "They answered," she said. Later that night, rain began to fall again over Clear Creek, washing away fresh tire marks from the recovery vehicles. A floodlight left behind blinked twice before dying, its reflection trembling in the water where the rings had been found. The canyon was quiet, but it felt less empty, as if it had exhaled the story it had been holding for 24 years. The sheriff's report came out on a windy Monday in late October 2022. The typewritten pages were thin enough that sunlight from the office window showed through the margins. Cause of incident: flash flood, probable impact trauma. Conclusion: accidental death. Recovered evidence: 2 school rings, 1 camcorder, 1 note, assorted personal effects. Detective Sarah Nguyen read it twice before signing off. It was the same story nature told. End. Everyone who stayed too long in the desert or the canyon. The weather changed faster than reason. Still, she felt the tug of unfinished business. There were no remains to return, no gravestones to photograph. Just air and water and proof of devotion. She closed the folder and whispered, "They stayed together." Janet Miller didn't need the official words. She had her own truth. The silver rings rested on the sill above her kitchen sink, catching the morning light, the same way her boys' laughter once caught her attention from another room. Every sunrise, she turned them so they reflected a thin stripe of brightness across the countertop. She called that light their hello. Visitors came often after the discovery. Reporters, podcasters, students writing essays about lost hikers. Janet greeted them all with calm politeness, but never watched the interviews they recorded. "If people hear their names, that's enough," she'd say. They wanted to be remembered, not explained. One afternoon, she walked the detective through the house. The brothers' room looked frozen in another decade. Walls covered with band posters, a trophy for regional science fair, a cracked skateboard leaning against the closet. On a shelf stood a dusty VHS camcorder, identical to the one found in the truck. Janet touched it lightly. "They filmed everything," she said. "I used to get mad about how much tape they wasted. Now I wish I'd bought them 100 more." In early November, the county installed a small marker at the recovery site, a wooden post reinforced by rebar. The letters burned carefully into the grain. The Miller Brothers, 1998, found 2022. They stayed together, and the river remembered. The sign faced west so that every sunset turned its carved letters gold. Hikers began leaving offerings, coins, plastic flowers, a baseball cap. Park rangers collected the items each month and stored them in a shed, labeled memorial tokens. They never threw them away. When winter snow dusted the canyon rim, Sarah returned alone. She set her hand on the sign and looked at the river below, thin as wire beneath the ice. The air smelled of pine smoke from a distant fire. She pulled her phone from her pocket, pressed record, and read aloud the note Aaron had written. "If anyone finds this, we stayed by the truck, water too high, waiting for it to fall." Her voice trembled on the last word. She let the phone capture 30 seconds of wind afterward before stopping the recording. Later, she would upload the clip to the department's cold case archive under the tag Closure Audio 01. Janet visited the canyon in spring. The water ran clearer than it had in years. She carried a mason jar filled with ashes from the porch lantern wicks she had kept burning every September. She poured them into the creek and watched them swirl away like smoke returning to sky. "Thank you," she whispered, unsure whether she spoke to God, the detective, or the canyon itself. Back in town, she joined a community group that taught hikers about flood safety. She opened every talk with the same sentence: "My sons didn't do anything wrong. They just thought the road would wait for them." She showed the students photos of the rings and the letter, explaining how small choices, checking weather, carrying a radio, could change everything. Her voice never shook, but afterward, she always stepped outside alone for a minute of air. That summer, a local filmmaker named Daniel Cruz contacted the sheriff's office. He wanted permission to use footage from the recovered camcorder in a short documentary for public safety education. Sarah agreed on one condition: it had to tell the story as it happened, quietly, without drama. The film premiered 6 months later under the title The River Remembers. It opened with the brothers' laughter inside the Bronco and ended with drone footage of Clear Creek winding through evening light. Over the credits, Janet's voice read Aaron's note. Audiences reacted the way people do when confronted with truth that feels both ordinary and enormous. Teachers used the film in geography classes. Parents sent letters thanking the family for turning tragedy into instruction. Janet received dozens of envelopes, each containing a short message: "I'll teach my kids to check the weather." She kept every one in a shoebox marked "Returned Echoes." A year later, the county completed a small pedestrian bridge across the creek where the Bronco had been found. Local students built it as a service project and named it Echo Crossing. At the dedication, Sarah spoke briefly about search and rescue improvements and early warning systems. Then she stepped aside for Janet, who unfolded a piece of paper and read, "When the rings came home, I understood that memory isn't heavy, it's light. It bounces, it travels. It can cross a canyon if someone's willing to listen. My boys didn't vanish. They waited for us to find the right frequency." The crowd applauded softly. Some wiped tears. As she left, a child from the school handed her a small silver charm shaped like a ring. "So they're never alone," he said. In late 2024, a university team performed a LiDAR survey of the creek for erosion studies. The imagery revealed 2 perfectly circular depressions in the riverbed where the rings had been discovered, still visible despite years of floods. The researchers called them twin echoes, natural impressions left by compacted sediment. One student joked that the Earth had decided to keep its own memorial. That same year, a hiking group found the replica rings locals had placed near the memorial, fishing lines still tying them together. They cleaned them, set them back under the water, and uploaded a video of the reflection. The clip spread across social media with the caption, "Still together. Always." Every September, Sarah drives back to Clear Creek. She parks at the overlook just before dusk, listening to the wind slide through pine needles. She keeps a copy of the brothers' last audio file on her phone. It's only 9 seconds long. The laughter, the shout, the splash, and that final exchange. Still together? Always. She plays it once, then turns off her phone and lets the creek answer in its own language of rushing water and shifting stones. Janet's health declined slowly, but peacefully. On her last visit to the canyon, she asked her caregiver to stop the car at the marker. She placed her hands on the post and closed her eyes. "Tell them the porch light's off," she said softly. "They can rest now." She passed away that winter, her will simple. Her ashes to be scattered where the note was found. Her house donated to the local youth film program. The students renamed it the Miller Studio. A year later, that same program produced a short film based on Luke's notebook sketches and titled it Find the Water First. It won a regional award for educational storytelling. During the acceptance speech, the young director said, "We didn't invent this story. We just listened to it until it spoke again." Today, travelers who pause at Echo Crossing see two small metal circles embedded in the bridge railing, set flush with the wood, replicas of the brothers' rings donated by the school. When sunlight hits them, they shine side by side, projecting a thin reflection onto the creek below. Locals say that on quiet evenings, if you stand still enough, you can hear a faint ping, like metal striking stone, the same sound a detector made the morning the world remembered them. The camera of the closing scene rises slowly over the canyon. Below, the creek threads silver through red rock, curling around the bend where the Bronco once slept. Wind brushes across the microphone, then steadies into the rhythm of moving water. In the end, the narrator says, "The brothers weren't lost. They simply followed the current until time caught up. The river didn't bury them. It kept their promise." As the drone climbs higher, sunlight flashes twice on the water. Two quick gleams side by side. The image holds, bright and silent, before fading into dusk.